Good morning, and thank you for joining today's Global Cyber Threat Intelligence Briefing. My name is Michael Holden from Bytes. I'm pleased to be joined today by John Nichols, Senior Global Incident Response Analyst from Checkpoint, and Dr. Francis Gaffney, the Director of Threat Intelligence from Mimecast, who will be taking us through the bulk of today's presentation. Some quick housekeeping. Attendee lines will be on mute throughout the session. There will be a Q&A at the end of the session, so please do post any questions in the questions window, and I will field them during the Q&A. This is a purely strategic discussion. Any commercials can be discussed with your Bytes account manager after the session, and everyone will receive the recording after the session. Lastly, we have a feedback survey at the end of this presentation, and would appreciate it if you could take 2 minutes to complete it, as we use this to make sure that our webinars are still hitting the mark. The agenda for today's webinar. Firstly, a short overview of Bytes. We will then move into the majority of the presentation from John and Francis, which will include information on the most damaging new cyber threats and the security issues your businesses are likely to see in the coming weeks, which will be followed by a Q&A session. So, who are Bytes? Bytes enable effective and cost-efficient technology sourcing, adoption, security, and management of software and hardware and cloud services. Bytes have a wide range of expertise, including licensing and SAM, data management, and security. On the security side, we have a wide range of technology partners with the highest level of accreditation with the majority of our vendors. We offer a variety of technical services, hold multiple accreditations, and boast award-winning delivery, which we are extremely proud of. But that's enough about us. Let's talk about our briefing. So, as I mentioned before, John is the Senior Global Incident Response Analyst at Checkpoint, and Francis is the Director of Threat Intelligence and Response at Mimecast. Bytes hold the highest level of accreditation with both of these vendors, and are Checkpoint's EMEA Strategic Partner of the Year. Both of these vendors are leaders in their respective markets and secure customers globally, giving them a unique view of the global threat landscape. And this is why we felt it would be appropriate to have them discuss this topic with us. And with that, I'm going to be handing over to John. John, you're still muted if you...
Hi, I apologise. Couldn't find the right button, but thank you, Michael, for the introduction, and good morning, everybody. As the introduction, my name is John Nichols. I'm a member of the Checkpoint Incident Response team, and we work closely with Bytes in relating to incident response and all of the services that come out of incident response.
Sorry, John, you've muted yourself off again.
Hi, sorry.
There we go. You're back on.
Good, thank you. The rise in threats. So three things to talk about today, really. The rise in threats that we're seeing in response to several things in relation to COVID-19 and the current situation. So the rise in threats to remote access solutions that we've seen, some conferencing threats, audio-visual conference call threats, and the prevalence and continuance of threats that we've seen in the past anyway. I think it's safe to say that in this situation, it's changed the way a lot of people work. There's a lot of us in the security industry certainly take for granted the facilities that we have to work remotely, but there's huge numbers of people whose lives have been altered immensely by this working from home situation. And that's put a lot of pressure on organisations to provide remote solutions to staff and provide them fairly quickly. So it's no real surprise that potential problems are being created. There's a concept in military communications which you can kind of bend to describe this situation, I think. There's a concept called sending messages in the clear, where speed overrides security. You send messages in plain text rather than encrypted. Kind of in that context, you can bend that to this situation. So this situation's a lot about availability overriding security, which is understandable. Organizations are facing pressure to provide workers with remote access to the normal solutions that they have at their desktop in their normal office environment. But at some point, there's potential to come back and think about the security. So just thinking about all these things, remote access solutions, conferencing threats, other threats that we see, just kind of honing in on each one of those. So Outlook Web Access initially. So Outlook Web Access, as the name implies, is gives you access across the web to your Outlook environment. I think the problem is with this situation that we're facing at the moment is that a lot of organizations, we've seen a massive spike in the amount of organizations that are exposing OWA directly to the internet. The problems that can be caused by that are due to the vulnerabilities, weaknesses, limitations on the specific versions of Exchange that are being offered up through OWA. There's the obvious risks associated with weak or leaked passwords, and there are still vulnerabilities in the latest versions of Exchange as recent as November last year. So I guess the risk to organizations and the risks that we will see in OWA being exposed are that attackers have something else to go at. We've seen a lot in the past before this pandemic, business email compromises, Office 365, phishing attacks on Office 365 environments, attackers gaining access through phishing to Office 365 environments and putting email forwarders on, and that becoming part of the sort of global scheme of attackers attacking then other organizations. So we've seen a lot in the past with business email compromise. It's obviously not going to stop, and the usage of OWA or the exposure of OWA directly to the internet potentially is going to cause the same problem. In the last week, we've had a number of calls from customers who've suffered business email compromises. I wouldn't like to say that any of those are specifically down to OWA being exposed to the internet, but it is a risk, and there has been a spike in these instances being exposed to the internet. Previously anyway, we were seeing remote solutions, all remote solutions were being targeted anyway. This situation that we're in, again, organizations are going to set up remote access for their workers, expose services to the internet that they didn't expose to the internet before. So whilst remote access solutions are still being actively targeted, remote desktop protocol, I mentioned in the slide there, was being brute forced anyway. But we have seen instances of SMB being exposed to the internet. And there's a spike there, increased by over 3,500. This is in a 48-hour period last week of exposure to the internet. Now, there's lots of vulnerabilities in SMB, depending on the underlying operating system. It's a dangerous thing to do, I guess. And so what we're saying is that if you expose these remote facilities to the internet, you put yourself at greater risk of being breached and thus having to call for assistance. So I think the basics are, when it comes to remote access capabilities, that they are kept up to date. If you have an underlying legacy version, you don't expose that to the internet. You put additional security controls in place, use a VPN, multi-factor authentication. If you can, use a virtual desktop infrastructure and only allow people access to the applications and services internally that they need access to. Limit your exposure where possible. And the easy things for an incident responder to say are monitor and log. And I guess the reasons that we say that is if you don't monitor, you won't find the things that are going wrong or could be going wrong, and the threats that are being enacted upon you. And if you don't log, you may not find out that something's happened, or during an investigation, we may not be able to find out something that's happened. So all of those things, VPN, multi-factor authentication, and these are often, when we talk about incidents that we've dealt with in the past, certainly with business email compromise, other access compromise, is securing it. So, username and password, not really good enough anymore in some respects, depending on the standard of the password, but multi-factor authentication would help. Okay, so Zoom, and I'm not going to say Zoom's been taking a bit of a hit recently, and we've probably all seen in the security press what's going on with them. So this isn't something that's directed at Zoom specifically, to the application specifically. What we've seen at Checkpoint is a huge rise in the amount of Zoom domains and Zoom executables being made available to try and lure people into downloading fake Zoom apps, being phished for their Zoom credentials or any other credentials by use of these Zoom domains and the executable files on app stores, etc. You'll see the graph down there, which was sometime last week, or goes up to the 3 months up to last week, the huge spike that we saw, the registration of new Zoom domains. So it's a risk, right? And it's one of those things. So, I'm not talking about the app specifically, the program specifically. There's some issues out there that I don't think all of the issues are necessarily flaws. Some of them are down to the way that the application is set up. But we just need to be careful, I guess. And what we've seen is this rise in malicious domains, malicious Zoom executables, to trick people into joining meetings they shouldn't, or downloading applications to use Zoom that they shouldn't. All the other threats are still prevalent. So all the threats that we used to see before, anything like this, any situation in the world, we see some threat using that to lure people. So what we've seen in the wild, Android banking Trojan masquerading as a coronavirus finder app. Now, maybe these days with everybody in lockdown and isolation, that's become less prevalent. Who knows? Routers and DNS hijacks have always been going on anyway, but they're now being used to spread malicious COVID-19 apps. And distributed denial of service around, and maybe this comes from the luxury of being a gateway provider, firewall provider, that people phone us first when they get a denial of service attack. But 50% of calls into our incident response hotline last week related to distributed denial of service attacks. And these are from all of those verticals that you see there: government, banking, medical, energy, retail. The latest one we've seen is against a manufacturer of N95 masks, who effectively are being threatened that somebody will launch a denial of service attack on them, which is not good in these times, really. Everything else, as we say, is still going on. Ransomware keeps going. Some groups have said they won't target hospitals, others still have. We've had 2 education establishments in the last week who have had 2 separate attacks quite close together. 2 new investigations came into us on the incident response hotline yesterday relating to large 5,000 seat plus organizations who have been hit by ransomware. And I guess that brings around another set of problems, really, because we always used to the people that deal in incident response and incident recovery, etc. It's easier to go on site, or we often go on site and help customers out with situations like this. Well, we can't do that anymore because we're all working remotely. So it becomes harder for the organizations to recover from these because they haven't got the people in the right places necessarily to enable that, or the people whose machines have been hit by ransomware can't take them anywhere to have them replaced. reinstalled, etc. So as we've said, there's always been an uptick in attacks and malicious activity for every worldwide issue of late in the last recent years. Phishing attacks will continue. Ransomware attacks will continue. I think from our threat intelligence, we've seen 44,000 new coronavirus or COVID-related domains set up just this year, which is a bit, kind of outrageous. They're only after one thing, these attackers. So what's the impact? I guess at the moment, a lot of our attention is making sure that ourselves and our families are safe and protected. And this, in some respects, can take our attention away from our IT infrastructure. It can, because we're working from home, working remotely, it can stop a lot of the things that we would normally do. We don't get access to the right things. But a lot of work's going into helping people who usually work in an office environment work remotely, which is leading to extra exposure to get things working. Potentially means that the security is not being put in place in the first place, and people have to go back and rethink about it. The impact later, I'm convinced at the moment we're not seeing a lull in attacks, and I guess we're not seeing a lull in attacks being reported to us. I just feel that in the coming months, when we start to try and return to some sense of normality, a lot more attacks will be uncovered, and thus the work for people like us will go up. So I guess the summary that I've got is about remote solutions and conferencing utilities and making sure they are protected sufficiently. Layered security is always mentioned, VPN, multi-factor authentication. Limit the exposure. If you don't have to expose a service to the internet, don't expose it to the internet. If you need to expose it to the internet, try and limit who you expose it to by the use of things like DMZs, firewalls, gateways, etc., to keep them relatively secure. The truth is that attackers don't stop during pandemics, during any other worldwide situation that we've seen in the last few years. And beware of any COVID-related thing. A thing is easier to say, but something I saw written somewhere else, which is I think is a very good thing to remember. The cure for coronavirus will not come in an email. So if you get emails about it with links to click, don't. We've talked about the amount of malicious domains there are out there relating to this. And most importantly, I guess, is keep ourselves, our families, everybody associated, our work colleagues, everybody keep safe. That's it from me. Thank you for listening. I'm sure there'll be some questions, and I will obviously stick around for questions.
Thanks. So good morning to you. So my name's Francis Gaffney. I'm from Mimecast, and our main focus is email. So following on from John's talk there, I'm just going to go through what we view as intelligence and why we sort of not look at it differently, but how we look at it. And really, for us to do any sort of intelligence predictions, which is what it should be, we need to see contextualize what we're looking at. What we're providing to people is actionable and obviously helps improve the overall cyber hygiene. But that top right corner there is has to be predictive. If I'm telling you that we've seen IOCs, it's actually a bit late sometimes to do anything about it. So what we try and do is look ahead to where we think the next attacks are going to be coming from. And how do we do that for ourselves? We have this 3 layers. So imagine yourself being the inside the keep, the castle keep, and we are there as the threat landscape, looking around the castle wall. But there's 3 types of email that we are concerned with and how we sort of badge ours. One would be emails coming into our organisation, ones that the customers will be sending internally, so you internally sending a message to one of your colleagues, and then ones that your customers, as in the customers of our customers, are sending to each other, and what's happening to them in case they bring in any malware into the organisation. So we look at a layered approach, and if I talk to you for a moment just as a baddie, these are the layers I'm looking at to effectively attack you in. So I can identify hardware that you either haven't updated, that you have used, and thinking more of firmware. So working from home has created a whole new threat landscape for us, because when I go to look at people's social medias accounts, I can see in the background they've got a television or they've got a printer, and what I'm looking at there is I can see a television or a printer that's firmware is no longer supported, because the manufacturers obviously try and encourage you to buy the latest one. So I can see now that you've got an old TV, but it's a smart TV. So therefore I'm going to look to ways of actually using known vulnerabilities to get into your home network, then piggyback to jump into your work network. Same thing happens with software. So if I'm looking at software, we're looking at people who haven't patched their software for some time. And again, what you do when you drop malware down on people's accounts is actually seeing what systems they use, whether they actually, what service pack they're on, and so on and so forth. But that one there, purple, the people, that's the one I'm actually after. People is what makes companies vulnerable. And you've seen various statistics all around the place, and as John's already spoken about, that you actually can see the human error element. It's when people click on things when they're not sure whether they should be or not. And this is really where the psychological aspect of the attackers comes in, because they're trying to play on known vulnerabilities. And people's vulnerabilities could be processes, and that could be that a contractor in this day and age, they need to be able to deliver on time, on task. And if I can do anything to disrupt that, then they're going to use different processes, whether it be using Slack or Dropbox to try and get around email security systems. And then partners, that outer wall, that orange one I showed in the previous slide, this is where we're looking at third parties or in people's supply chains. If I can jump into the supply chain, people will open up an email from a known account, then I'm actually able to move around certain softwares. So exactly what John had just said, malicious actors prey on people's anxieties. Yeah, this is what, that's their sort of tool of trades. We have many examples in the past of where global incidents, and it could be anything. So I go back just before this would be the Australian bushfires, the Olympics 2012. This is where people use world events to prey on people's anxiety, and the bushfire was a nice example, because we're seeing effectively the modus operandi being repeated for the coronavirus. But in the bushfires, people didn't know what was happening, how it would affect them, so they were clicking on things, looking for information. And so usually the first phase of attackers is actually just looking at people clicking on links opportunistically to get them to click on links to see what's going on. So it's not say fake news, but it is just sending them to spoof or fake websites so that they can actually start harvesting credentials. And it could be something as harmless in a way of just asking you to enter your email and password so that you can be updated with further advice on what's going to happen with the bushfires or in the coronavirus. And that way, we can, sometimes you get the email address, and a lot of people use their same email passwords for different accounts. So you would try those, sort of easy, and that's the entry level attackers. Then it moves on to things of, charities and things of how you can donate and what you can do to help. And so that would be sometimes the next phase of attack, where people are now clicking on various charities to offer to give money to these campaigns. It could be that the updates on what I need to do. So if I use Brexit, so I'm jumping around in examples here, but Brexit's a nice one again for the UK, because people weren't sure whether their passports were going to be valid, whether they need new driving licenses, the international driving license, whether they'd be able to travel, whether travel insurance applied. So these questions were all coming in again, people, and that second phase of not understanding. And so with coronavirus, you see here this COVID-19, you see the first sort of ones we started seeing in the UK. We're actually looking at people asking for safety measures and clicking on these PDF links. as I said, it moved into charities, and this list of charities was provided by the Washington Post and by the New York Times. And these were just, saying, look, if you want to give, these are things, but be careful. There are a number of malicious sites, and you can see, the one there, the British Red Cross Blood Services. How, as John quite rightly has already said, there's a number of spoof sites already being set up for all these charities, and you can see onto the next one, where people have already attempted to drop malware down on people's accounts by getting them to go to these fake sites through email links. And then the last slide here I've got just showing is this working from home. Now, this is slightly different to the bushfires and to Brexit, because obviously people were in the offices. This one, people are working from home, so it's new practices. And again, following from what John had said, the number of domains that we have seen that have been created for various communication applications. So you can see here, we've got Skype, Microsoft for Teams and things, and you've got the Zoom there in the top right. There's a number of different accounts we've seen being set up, or people being linking to fake sites to enable their ability to work from home. And so these ones you see, and again, this is just taken from actually only in the last week or so that we've managed to see an increase in numbers. So it's dated the 5th of March, but actually it's increased so significantly we've had to put out a warning. And this is where it's inviting you now to a meeting, on a VoIP office portal. But what it does, when it goes to the site, it actually encourages you to enter in your office, your company, your organization's log-on account credentials. So you log in, such and such at Mimecast, or such and such at Bytes, or such and such at, and then it asks you to put in your company password, so that you can actually activate this portal, this message that you're trying to receive. And people unfortunately are clicking on it because they need to be able to work from home, they need to be able to continue their normal processes. So the working from home, we're just saying, making sure that where we were protecting office and organization networks, actually we need to now start thinking about home networks. And as I said, home networks are so easy to get into, because it doesn't necessarily have the protection of the various vendors that are available on the markets for organizations. You don't see those necessarily in the home. And again, me, if I was acting as an attacker, I'm looking through your social media, I'm trying to find different ways, and it could be that how people have done it in the past would be through your vulnerabilities, such as your children. So it could be that your children play hockey or rugby, and therefore I'm trying to sort of start a conversation with yourself about it. One that was a popular one would be to identify that you go to a favorite restaurant, and I'll send you a 10% off voucher, and you click on that, and obviously you have to enter details. And again, it's that half-assumed credentials. But it's part of this, what we call pattern life analysis, that moves on to social engineering, where I can actually now get you into a position where you can actually start allowing me to drop malware down. And just going on to John's last slides, we're talking about coronavirus and COVID-19, and for us, Australian bushfires we're still seeing. But actually, big attacks are the ransomware, and 60% of what we're observing in our Australian customer base is actually targets against education and healthcare. So there are big. I mean, obviously the healthcare is related to COVID, but education is where a lot of people are now identifying that children are going through Google Classroom or through the various online ways of teaching, and then piggybacking onto these so that they can actually then start dropping malware. And again, I've got to support John 100%. What we're seeing is the maze, the Tech droppers are still very big for us, and we see literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of these a month coming through our firewalls that we're observing. So update your home Wi-Fi with a strong password. Try not to piggyback onto open ones. Update your personal contact information to make sure that you can assist in verification. And this is what we're saying here is, use multi-factor authentication. Again, people try and work easier, but to get that better functionality, sometimes that productivity, you're sacrificing security. And so with some people, they'll actually switch off this multi-factor because they need to get it done, get it working. And these additional pop-ups, or having to go to find one of the tokens that lets you access your email, can actually slow your process down, so people then deactivate those, and this isn't the time to be doing it. Again, never click on any COVID-related attachments. And again, I can't support John enough when he was saying that, you know, you're not going to get a cure through an email. You know, unless this is actually of relevance necessarily to you, I'd go looking for the information properly without you having to enter into credentials, or without you having to click on any links in your emails. Double check URLs and links. Now, I've put that one in just to enforce, because again, how people are moving on in terms of social changes is people are now using mobile devices such as the mobile phone or their tablets. So if you hover across a link on your laptops or desktops, you actually see sometimes where that link is going to send you to. It's not so easy to do that on a phone, and therefore, knowing this, people are able to do these spoof domains. And then update usernames and passwords on trusted sites only. So again, making sure that you're not entering details into sites that you're not fully sort of aware of. What worries me for the next few months? Well, ransomware. Again, John touched on in his final slides. We are seeing so much of this. People have now realised that data is monetized. It's, you know, I can make money out of it. So the first early stages of these sort of things, I would actually drop some malware down just to see what your organisation is able, or even if it's home, what you're able to pay. So there's no point in me, you know, going to a home network and saying, right, if you don't pay £1 million, I'm not going to release your photos. What they do is look at it and think, well, actually, this person would pay about £1,000 to get their stuff back, and that's what they do. That first bit, that bit of spyware, is really just looking at what is able to be attacked. 5G deployment. Now, this is interesting because, as I said, people with their mobile phones and tablets, I can actually drop bigger packets of information down, so therefore we can do video streaming and download so much more. But also I can download onto your devices that malware, because if I did it in the 3G, 4G space, that malware isn't obfuscated as easily. So as a result, your phone will start heating up, or your battery life will whiz down quite quickly. With the 5G, because I can put more information down on your phone, I can actually hide what I'm doing on your devices. So again, making sure that you're going to trusted sites and you're downloading places. The sophisticated spear phishing and spear whaling, these ones I've told you about just now, the pattern life analysis, where I spend, you know, a good couple of days doing a bit of homework on you. And by doing that homework, it's actually going to reap dividends for me, because I'll get a more successful attack. The remote working, be careful about bringing your own devices, bringing things into your organization's network that may not actually have a chance to have been sort of certified and made sure that they're able to work safely. The shadow IT legacy systems, this is obviously where people are still in their networks, have legacy things such as Windows XP, which I found on one company's last week, and they were surprised that it actually was just running, it was running a printer system. The internet-based attacks, so we've spoken about this quite a lot in terms of the firmware on people's televisions or Ring devices, Hive, these various other things where I can actually get into your home network in different ways. And last one I'm just talking about, my concern is increasing the attempts to capture data in transit. And this we can go into future conversations. So I appreciate there's going to be some questions later, as I say, and that's it for me. I'll just hand back over.
Thanks for that. So just a quick one. As a reminder, if there are any questions, please do post them in the questions window now, and I will pose those to both John and Francis in a moment. With all of the information that we've received today, I just wanted to bring your attention to some of the services that Bytes do offer around threat assessments and health checks. Most notable one here, I think, is the instant response that we have. First call is free on that, and if you all want to, we'll help you triage any incidents that you think that you have, no matter your security infrastructure. If you are interested in any of these services, please do let us know in the feedback form at the end. And with that, I don't see any questions at this point, so I think we can probably closing up. So first of all, thank you to everybody who's joined the call today. We know that it's difficult to take an hour out of your day to spend with us, and we do appreciate it. Thank you to both John and Francis for presenting for us today. We found it very informative, and we look forward to seeing what else we have. Thank you very much, everybody.